Now we come to the portion of the service before we get into our Bible study that we talk about some end times news, trends, and the prophecy update that happens each week. And as we mentioned last week, how things are starting to escalate more and more. In fact, even this week, we saw a lot of stuff happening on the transgender issue, taking a whole nother level, where there's a new legislation in New York City and Washington State where if you misdiagnosing a person and you call them, something like a he instead of a she, or if, you kind of close your doors in a business-wise to them, you could be fined up to $250,000. So that's just the starting of where things are going. The next step will be imprisonment if you don't comply by these sort of standards and by all that, their whole agenda. So as we mentioned, it's going to increase and it's going to be harder and harder as believers that we're going to be more attacked because of our faith and our belief and stance against this immoral, sinful lifestyle. And the result of all this sort of stuff is that the toleration of the homosexual movement. As we saw last year, it kind of escalated with the legalizing of gay marriages in so many different countries around the world. It's going to get worse and worse if you don't bow down to this lifestyle, and even for that matter with even Islam, if you don't bow down and embrace the refugees and things like that. Even this, in 2 weeks' time, on January 20th through the 22nd, the World Economic Forum in Davos, which is in Switzerland. And this is where the ruling elite come together, and they kind of carve up the global for plunder and profit. And this is where they set the agenda on some of the economic issues. But part of their issue in their forum is continue with this whole exploration of the series on LGBT issues. So they're opening more of those doors. And if you go on to the World Economic Forum, some of their headlines is, how can we improve the attitudes towards transgender community, the real cost of LGBT discrimination, the real story of gays in the Middle East, because there's millions of gays or hundreds of thousands there, but they don't come out like in the Western worlds because they'll be executed or thrown off of buildings. So they're a lot more quiet about it. Also the state of the LGBT rights today and other topics like that. So we're starting to see an escalation on the government issues. And then you're starting to see we've talked about how they're infiltrating the schools. There's an 8-year-old boy, and he's learning to become a LGBT drag queen. This came out of the Huffington Post the other day. And here's what the mom was saying, quote, "Society needs to steer away from what is typically known as the gender roles and stereotypes and accept the fact that it's okay for a boy to wear makeup and express himself as an artist. This doesn't define his gender identity nor his sexual preference. He's just exploring being a kid. Being judgmental and closed-minded on the issue is not only hurtful to our children, but also inhibits their freedom to self-expression and prevents the opportunity for them to embrace their true identities." And people are embracing this whole idea. In fact, there's a new school starting this year in September in Atlanta, Georgia, for all LGBT youth and the teachers. And the principal is a transgender himself. It's from kindergarten through year 12. And it's going to be starting in a Unitarian Universalist congregation, which is anything goes, so liberal, so progressive. Atheists are in there and all kinds of rubbish. So it's really an anti-Christian, congregation. But that's where it's starting out, and it's going to start in September. Amazing to see this escalating. And so the real target of the LGBT transformation is to the children, because that's where they're trying to reach the next generation. They started with our generation back in the cartoons 10, 20 years ago. So that changed the idea of where society is today. To change society for the next 10 to 20 years, they're reaching the children right now in the school system. And that's exactly a playbook from Adolf Hitler, because he was able to reach the nation starting with the children because they were force-fed this sort of stuff. The people today are force-feeding on this whole issue of homosexuality is okay, transgender is okay. Anything that is against Christianity. And right now, in 2016, we're seeing this increase just 10 days into it. And we're starting to see the amount of reports that are coming out. Amazing. Also, we're starting to see a whole nother push and not a whole nother agenda. We're seeing this before, but he's pushing it harder. The Pope with the one world religion. He came out with the video just the other day. And with an Islamic guy, a Jewish, and a Catholic priest, and whether it was a Hindu or a Buddhist, one of the two, can't remember. It's all the same. They're trying to push the peace and unity, coming together, love. Can't we all just get along? So there's going to be a greater push in this year to come with this whole one world religion. Amazing things that come out of the Pope. He's not a Christian. He's not a believer in Jesus Christ. The agenda that he has, the things that come out of his mouth. Also, speaking of Catholic, there was an apostate Catholic that turned Muslim preacher, and you probably saw this in several different newspapers. He's come out, and he's made a lot of headlines. He's from here in Melbourne, preacher that conquest, destruction of Rome and Christian churches, saying that we will break your crosses and enslave your women by the permission of Allah. This is his agenda, and there's a picture of him outside of the Vatican, and there's a video of him talking about the establishment of the Islamic caliphate, because they're taking over Rome and Europe, part of this whole refugee issue, or the state of Syria, saying in a dream that has been realized. It is only a few years ago we're speaking about it, yearning for the establishment of Islam, and now we're seeing it before our eyes. And so, this Islamic invasion is going to continue. And the governments are embracing this sort of stuff. Muslims, again, the persecution against Christians. This one took place, I think it was on Wednesday, where they were taking Christians and they locked them inside coffins and then they burned them alive. Brutality in the Christian persecution that's happening these days. And then Iran is forcibly converts Christian churches into mosques now. Crazy stuff. We're going to see an increase in persecution around the world as believers. We need to be praying for the persecuted Christian. We need to be praying that we stay strong and not compromise on the gospel. And then, again, continue with the Islamic invasion. German dictator Angela Merkel on her New Year's Eve telecast was condemning the Germans for not embracing the Muslim refugees coming in, and how cold-hearted their hearts were for not allowing this to happen. The 1.1 million that are coming in there, that's going to cause more disaster there. And even that same night, over 1,000 drunk, aggressive men in Cologne, Germany, raped and assaulted over 80 women. And nothing's going to be done. In fact, they will be blamed instead of the Muslims and the refugees. Sad to see, but this is what's happening all over Europe. It's going to happen here in Australia and America and other places that are embracing this Islamic invasion. On the economic issue, again, the crazy stuff happening with the stock markets and what was taking place just within 30 minutes when China opened up its trading, they closed it down after a 7% plunge. And so it's going to, and several times that happened in this past week. So we're starting to see a greater escalation. The waves of the economic is going to hit. Brazil is heading for the worst recession since 1901, according to the economic people have said. So we know that's going to happen. We need to be ready, be prepared for these things. And then on a Middle Eastern and military issue, Saudi warplanes attacked an Iranian embassy in Yemen. And so Saudi Arabia severed ties with Iran over the storming of the embassy in Tehran. And the move came just after days after Saudi authorities executed a prominent Shia cleric. So no doubt there's going to be more escalation and retaliation between these two nations. So such turmoil that's going to continue to arise in the Middle East. And then speaking of turmoil and unpredictable dictators, in North Korea, as you saw on Tuesday, they conducted a successful hydrogen bomb test. that created shock waves throughout the nations around them in China, up to a 5.1 magnitude. But what's more scary about this hydrogen bomb, it's the EMP that they have ready to go. So again, a hydrogen bomb will cause a lot of disaster within any city. We saw that with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And the potential damage blast in New York and Los Angeles could turn it into rubble. But as we mentioned before, the EMP, electronic magnetic pulse, can turn countries and America back into the Stone Age when it hits the grid. And they said about 90% of the American people will die through starvation or societal collapse, because everything's electronic these days, and once it hits the electronic system, all the electricity, everything's shut out. And it may take months or even years to repair and fix that stuff. So you can see and imagine the chaos that can happen. And all they can do, they don't have to launch it into the States. All it can do is bomb it just above the United States in the atmosphere and cause this pulse to wipe out America or any other country. So they're very unstable. But you can see that they've already done these tests, nuclear tests, since 4 times now since 2006. So, and you got a crazy dictator in there. And then speaking of wiping out America, Obama vetoed a defunding of the Planned Parenthood. So again, he's against guns, but he's for murder and slaughtering of millions of babies every year. How does that work? How do you live with a moral conscience? You're against guns, but you're for murder and slaughtering people in brutal ways. And again, this is the first time that in years that the Congress passed this legislation of pro-life measures, sent it to the president's desk, and of course, because of his agenda to destroy, he's going to veto it. So, interesting days ahead. Be prepared. Be watchful. This stuff shouldn't shock us, but sometimes you're just amazed. Are you serious of some of these reports that come out? But these are great opportunities to witness to people as well, as we mentioned, these updates. And so more stuff's going to happen. And the exciting thing is it's the sooner and sooner return of Jesus Christ. It's going to get worse before Christ comes back. But we need to be prepared. We need to be ready. Stay in the Word of God. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Amen? And that concludes today's update.